can take advantage of. So I'll give you a brief introduction about myself. I've actually been using CRM products, started with Onyx Customer Center in 1994. So I've been in the CRM space as long as it's been CRM. And you will find me referring to CRM as opposed to Dataverse or Dynamics 365. It's just old habits, tough to break. I've been selling, actually tried to convert a customer of mine from Onyx to CRM 1.0 back in 2003. I had to wait until CRM 1.2 because they couldn't sort notes anything but by the title. So had to wait for the technology to catch up a little bit. I've also been an ISV partner of Visionary Software since 2006. Those of you who've been around a while, we developed a product called VAST, which was the first auditing solution in CRM, and we sold it to C360, who sold it for years as C360 Audit. And we currently have an app on AppSource, Visionary Rules. It's a JavaScript generator, so it just takes all your metadata and lets you define rules in your language of your system, and it generates the JavaScript you need on the form to hide sections and show tabs and things like that. But enough about that. I'm here today as a Power Platform advocate and a huge fan of Power Automate. So today's material can be found on my website. This slideshow, as well as a blog that I've written that described my adventures as a experienced CRM admin, but a novice novice Power Automate user. So there's some learning, some good. If you're just starting out in that journey as well, I definitely direct you to that blog. It's got a ton of links to other blogs across the universe here, and it will save you a lot of time if you're just starting out and give you some idea of how you translate CRM workflow ideas into Power Automate ideas. So the key takeaway for today is that Power Automate, which is replace the good old workflow and that we know and love, and the Dataverse, used to call CRM, are really powerful when you use them together and leverage the strengths of each product, and that's exactly what this solution does. The business problem we have wanted to solve here is that of data degradation. So you may have defined a great system with lots of controls about hiding fields if this was this value and making sure this value is filled in if that value is this, and all these JavaScript rules you may have enforced in your user interface. Well, if somebody does a data import or a systematic integration, they can go right around those user interface rules and change data that invalidates your business rules. The other thing that has been a key pain point actually is that some browsers, and I'm looking at UIE, do not run the JavaScript correctly that enforces your rules. So users are pretty tricky. They can figure these things out, and some of our users have found out that they can skirt entering a bunch of required data if they just use IE. So the garbage data keeps increasing, and it is an ongoing problem. The longer you have their system, the more garbage you have in it. Things like leads, you may have junk leads coming in, that you immediately disqualify, but you want to keep them there because you want to know how many times people hit your website and you have metrics and everything else. But these things can hang around in your database forever. Contacts with nothing but a last name, still show up in queries. Your view of contacts or accounts may look like a bunch of no-name people are showing up there, blanks and things like that. So it's a common problem. I don't think any client I've ever worked with has not had a problem with data. One of the main problems is because humans don't really like to follow rules, and they'll try to get things done as quickly as they can, as easily as they can. And from a business perspective, rules change. So something you didn't have in place 4 years ago means that data is not following the same rules you do today. So as a result of all these issues, it's increasingly difficult to detect and fix what we call data anomalies. So to fix this problem, we created a framework, and the solution entails basically using standard CRM, Dynamics 365 advanced find queries. So basically, we would run something like, if we want to detect contacts that are active contacts linked to an inactive account is a common one we run. So we do a simple advanced find query that says, show me all the contacts in my system that are active but are linked to an account with a status that's inactive. And we can run that query. Maybe you find 100 rows, and now instead of going, okay, now what? That fetch XML from that advanced find query now becomes the source of a Power Automate flow list rows action. So Power Automate will run that advanced find query and return a result set, and then you can loop through every record returned by that query and do something with it. And in our case, we're going to record the results in some custom tables, email the results to the admin, and this enables us to take control of our data in a systematic way. It's really easy to use, actually. The core technique here is to create an advanced find view. You can also use the fetch XML builder for more complicated queries. Download the fetch XML by clicking that handy button on the advanced find view. Open the file up in Notepad, and that's a very important point. If you just use the open button, it's going to open you up in your browser, and you're going to get little minus signs before the fetch XML brackets, which won't compile right. So if you just open it up in Notepad all the time, it opens it up perfectly, and then you can just open it up in Notepad, copy all text, and then open up your Power Automate flow, open up that list row step, and paste it in. And then you can do whatever you want with the rows returned by that query. So we built out a couple of four different custom Dataverse tables to help manage the process. So this DAP, you're going to hear me refer to DAP fairly often in this presentation. That stands for Data Audit Parameter. So this is a table we've built that's basically a driving table for this Power Automate job. Each record in the DAP table contains one data anomaly job we want to run. Basically, and it contains one advanced find query. We can also do this with SQL as well, but for this purposes of this demo, think about it as an advanced find query. You're going to take the fetch XML from that query and paste it into a record in the DAP table, and that allows you to then build up a series of these advanced find table queries that you can run on a nightly basis to run through all of these issues that you have found in the past to make sure they're not reoccurring. The data audit entity table is a table I didn't think I had to build before I started working on it, but this enables Power Automate to generically process requests against different entities, and I'll get into that a little bit more as we go forward. The data audit job log is, as you saw from the intro, we started out doing auditing, and I still do auditing pretty much wherever I go. It's nice to have the system tell you what it's doing. So every time we have this Power Automate job, it loops through all these DAPs and then creates a data audit job log record for each, and it'll return things like how many rows to reprocess and were they successful and things like that. And then for every row that advanced find returns, we're going to write another record in this, my favorite entity, called DAD. Too bad this wasn't delivered 6 days ago. But this data audit detailed log entity captures basically every data anomaly we found, anything we want one of our support team to look at, or any record that we automatically deactivated or deleted through this Power Automate process. One reason why we do this is when you delete something, obviously it's gone, but we retain the GUID of that deleted record in this DAD table. And like most people, I assume you have some kind of an Azure backup getting the data from the cloud to an Azure database you can access. I personally use Scribe because I like the way it retains deleted records. So we have a Scribe job that runs every night, copies things to Azure, and then so if something that is deleted by this job, we have the GUID here in the DAD table. We can go back and recreate that record from our backup. So that's the process. We've got 4 custom tables that have a bunch of data in it. I'm going to briefly go through the key one here, the data audit parameter table. So as you can see, this screenshot shows 5 different jobs we're running, and the name shows you what kind of things we're working against, what kind of advanced find query we're doing. And actually what I do is when I build a custom query, I name it basically with the DAP number here and the name, so I can go back and easily find that query in advanced find and make changes if I need to. As you can see, we've got these jobs processing against a couple different entities in CRM. The run frequency, we set it up so it will run daily, weekly, or monthly. And I'll show you how that works in a second. And then we've found 3 different things we want to do. So in our company, we want to deactivate records, active records that have been stale for 90 days, no activity against them. If it's a contact, they're not tied to any opportunities, there's no cases, there's no nothing, no timeline stuff, no emails. So we'll deactivate them. And then another 90 days later, we have a job that runs through all the inactive contacts and says, I'm going to delete anything that's been here for 90 days. So we've got plenty of backup in the system. The notify job is, okay, what do I do? If I've got an active contact that's linked to an inactive account, what do I do? Well, I can't really systematically do anything. I don't want to activate that account because it may have been merged away or whatever the problem was. So we have what I call a notify operation, and that creates the DAD record that a support person on our team reviews to correct the problem. So I talked about the data audit driving query. So basically, this determines which of my, I've got 30 something DAF records created in my production environment. Not all of them have to run every night, so this determines which one we run. So simple advanced find, and the DAF record will run if it's a daily job, run frequency equals daily, or it's a weekly job that ran more than 6 days ago. We do this so we can have it run on different days of the week, or it's a monthly job that last ran more than 1 month ago. So as I was saying, I created this query in CRM and Dynamics 365, ran it, got the results I wanted, and then the fetch XML from this, I just copied and pasted that and placed it into my data audit parameter table. All right, so this is the process, a big picture process, and we'll be going through. You'll see this diagram a few times. We're going to highlight the various aspects of it as we go along. And I do apologize for the death by PowerPoint, but if you've ever used Power Automate before, if you've got a bunch of conditions in there and switch statements and things, trying to navigate the flow is an exercise in screen refresh and scrolling left and right, and it's just very difficult to follow, especially with some lag here in presentation displaying the information I'm showing. So we'll see plenty of Power Automate and plenty of CRM in this, but to give you the best learning experience, this is a PowerPoint show. So starting at the bottom where it says start over here, the first thing we do is go through and initialize a whole bunch of variables, and then we do our list records. We run that query basically to say, all right, what data audits do we want to run today? And at the end of the processing everything, we send an email, and I'll show you that at the end of the thing, and we're done. But assuming we have some records that query returns, we're going to use the apply to each feature in Power Automate to loop through each one of them. And as we loop through them, we're going to create one of those audit records we talked about, that data audit job log. I'm then going to run that fetch XML query to find the records that are problematic. If we don't have any, or if they're more than one, I put in a max field in my data audit parameter table where we're deleting things. If I'm expecting to delete 20 records and I come back with 20,000, that could be a problem. So I have a little max parameter in there so we don't inadvertently delete a whole bunch of stuff that we didn't plan to. And then we update that audit log when we're done, telling us how many records we did, and we go pick up the next one. But if there are data anomalies to apply, to work on, then we just check out the DAP table tells me what operation to perform on these things, and we either delete the record out of CRM, update the record, setting the state code and status code to do a deactivate pair, or notify, which is just creating a data audit detail record for our support team to review. One key thing is when I delete or when I deactivate, I create an inactive data audit detail record that enables us to not clutter that view with the notify ones that we want somebody to work on. So I pretty much just stated this, but we have an outer loop that loops through our DAP table to find the jobs to run. We have an inner loop that runs that fetch XML and applies to each row returned whatever operation we decided we wanted to do. And like I said, I like to audit things, so we update that audit log record and send me email when done, so I'm sure everything's working as expected every morning when I come in. All right, so let's dive into the flow a bit. We're going to start with the start of the flow. We initialize variables and do that list record step. So the first decision you need to make in Power Automate is how you're going to trigger the flow. And it's actually very important to get this right, because there are some subtle syntax differences that happen if you pick a pick different triggers. So best advice here is to pick the trigger that you plan to use for production. And this is, you can trigger it off of a save of record or other things like that. This is just a very simple nightly or daily job. Run this once a day, and it runs through our daily, weekly, and monthly jobs, and runs those queries and creates those records. So one thing I wanted to give as a little hint for new users is I like to put in my very top block of my Power Automate flow a little comment that tells me what version number it is. If you've used the Power Automate admin section, you'll know it's incredibly easy to not know what environment you're in or to be in the wrong environment. So this helps when we're moving solutions from our dev to QA to production environments. This helps. This little comment here helps to make sure that we're importing and implementing what we think we are. So the first thing you do after you get your trigger is to start initializing variables, and this is one of the things I do not like about Power Automate, but I assume it's going to be fixed in a future version. You have to use this initialize variable action, and you have to use it at the front of your program, and you have to use them sequentially. You can't, so one after the other, all you see in my job is about 30 initialized variable statements. You have to scroll all the way down to the bottom to get to something interesting. So hopefully they'll create some kind of initialized variable action where you just put all the variables you want in there and you're done. So anyway, so the first thing we do is initialize a bunch of variables that we use inside of the program. So just a word about variables. They're very good to store, counters when you're going through your loops. We're using it in this job to store the differences in entity values. So if you're deactivating a lead, it's a different series of codes than if you're deactivating an opportunity. And then if you're closing or closed lost or closed won an opportunity, or an inactive account or an inactive custom entity, they can all have different state code combinations. So if we store that in our data audit entity table, my Power Automate flow can just generically say whatever that table says the status code and state code should be, that's what I'm setting it to. We also, for our reporting and things, we want to know what the name field is on that entity, and we want to know what the GUID field name is. So account ID, contact ID, your custom ID, your custom table ID. So when we know so each entity tells us what GUID it is. So now I can go and say, all right, I want to delete a field where the GUID field matches this name, right? Where it's account ID equals my GUID. Delete this record. And then I like to create some kind of an environment variable to store what CRM organization I am in, because we are creating a hyperlink that will enable the user to open up the CRM record. So you need to know what your CRM base URL is in order to do that. I am guilty of this, but try not to use variables because it's easier than figuring out the syntax. In other words, you can have a field that you want to string together a bunch of values from, and it can be quite tricky to figure out what that syntax should be. It is easier to put each individual thing into variables and then combine them that way. But the overhead for defining, initializing, setting, and then clearing variables that you don't really need is pretty high. I am guilty of this, as I said, and when you start out, you'll probably do the same thing, but try not to just overuse variables, I guess is the message there. All right, so again, the key takeaway, the rows returned by an advanced find query can be processed row by row in a flow. So what you do, a 4-step process here, you create your advanced find query. As I showed you, this is the one that runs my data audit parameter. This is the driving query. Then you click on the old download fetch XML button. Creates a fetch XML button down on your toolbar there. And I just hit the little button and hit open. If you do that, it's going to, if you do hit the open button, you'll open it in your default browser. I always show it in the folder, and then right click and open up a notepad. Again, before I mentioned that if you open a notepad, the fetch XML is fine. If you open it up in a web browser, you're gonna have to remove minus signs from the beginning of these fetch statements. And then once you have your fetch XML copied up, you just open up your list rows action in Power Automate, and in this fetch XML query box, you just paste that fetch XML in, and that's it. So let me show you what this is the query that actually runs the list records for the DAP. We're looking at the data audit parameter table. I'll get to this in a minute, but where our fetch XML query is, go against that data audit parameter entity and find me a bunch of stuff fields from that. The expand query field here is quite useful. As I mentioned, I have a data audit parameter that has a many-to-one relationship back up to the data audit entity. And then this is how I bring in these fields we were talking about, the field name for the GUID, the plural entity name, the singular entity name, the field name for the entity name value. So just bringing in some things from another table, this makes it so I can basically process any field from the DAP table or the DAE table natively with using variables that are predefined in Power Automate. So that's the first part, is getting our getting that list of what do we want to run today. So now we're going to go through and basically apply to each and start running the queries that we have in that table. So this is the entire processing of a DAP. So every DAP is going through this process. We run through, when we do our query, we make sure we have at least one to run. If we don't, we terminate the job. And if we do, well, then we apply to each. And that's going to be pretty much the remainder of the presentation is going to be talking about what do we do and this apply to each block. This expands and this would be the starting of the scroll here. You're doing this live. But after we're done with everything, we then create an HTML table that tells me the results for every DAP that we went through. This compose formats it, and then we send an email, and I'll show you how that email looks at the end of this. So that's the process. Just making sure we have something to run, apply to each when we do, and when we finish up, we send a little email. All right, so this is now digging into that apply to each DAP record here, expanding that process. The first thing I do is create a record in that data audit table, so that I know that, for a weekly job, I can go back and see, okay, it's running every week. Great, good to go. And it just gives me, again, I'm an auditing guy. I like to make the computer tell me what it's doing. And to build this up, you just have to fill out. So every table you open up, it has a name, of course, but then all these are all the custom fields that I've added to this entity. I want to capture the amount of times I create a record. How many data anomalies do I have? And then this is just the initial one. I create a new record here. I leave all these things blank, error count, delete count, create count, all that stuff. And then I go back in and fill it in at the end. But the key takeaway here is there's a one-to-many relationship between data audit parameter and data audit job log. Every time you run that parameter, if you run it daily, you're going to have one of these job logs every day. So we can go ahead and use this kind of funky syntax here where you put the plural name of the entity, parentheses, the GUID, end parentheses. That will give you the syntax you need to create the lookup on the dash table to the DAP table. All right. If I put you to sleep, please wake up. This is kind of this is the home run. This is the fireworks going off and all that. So with this design, in my data audit parameter table, I've got a plural entity name, which comes from the DAE table, but I've got an entity name and the query string. What's the fetch XML query I'm going to run? And I was pretty amazed when I first did this, but it works fantastically. This is a list record, list rows, showing the number of anomalies with just the table name and the fetch XML query. We can run any query against any Dataverse table and then do anything we want to with it. So what this query string is, again, just to reiterate, this is the fetch XML query that we pasted into one DAP record. So we're in a loop here. We're going through each DAP. The DAP that we created says, okay, find me all contacts that are linked to inactive accounts. That's the fetch XML. That's the query string that's in one of my DAPs. When I process that DAP, that query string is just kind of pasted in here to this fetch XML query, and Power Automate runs it. Really, really powerful. All right, real quickly, if I don't find anything, or like I said, if I have more than I was expecting to find, I go ahead and update that. So here's the conditions that will show you that. So I have an anomaly record count. If it's equal to 0, I go ahead and update that data audit log, job log, and say, yep, nothing happened here. And this is the normal case, right? We're looking for exceptions, data problems. So if we find 0, that's a good thing. So most of the jobs that run will go through here and not find any rows that meet those advanced find criteria, and it'll immediately go here and just update it and say, yep, we're good, no problems here today. But if we do have at least one record count, we then go ahead and do a condition that says, if the anomaly record count is greater than the max, then stop the run. So anomaly is greater than max, update a record again, we update that data audit job log, but this time instead of saying there's no recs, we say, hey, it's more than the maximum. If there are DAP records, we continue on and process them. So now we're going into the inner loop, right? We've run our query to find a DAP. We're processing one DAP, contacts linked to inactive accounts. We found 100 contacts that are linked to inactive accounts. Now we're going to do something with them. So we have 3 operations we can perform: notify, delete, and deactivate. So I use the switch switch control in Power Automate. So you switch on the operation to perform. That's right out of my data audit parameter table. So every data audit parameter job can specify whether you want to notify, delete, or deactivate that record. And the process we go through is slightly different, and we'll get into these each of these 3 in the next 3 slides. But so you can see, and you could add another use thought about yesterday actually, is to archive data. Let's say you have a SQL Server database that you use for reporting. You could, for example, take all the leads that were junk leads, and okay, get a count of 101 junk leads. All right, write a record into my SQL table that says we had 101 junk leads in this week. So there's plenty of uses for this. We just do these because these are notify, delete, and deactivate, because those are most appropriate for what we want to do with the data problems we uncover. So for deactivating, again, the trick here is that the different tables in Dataverse have different values to indicate this record is inactive. So that's why we use that data audit entity table to tell us what the inactive codes are for this entity that is defined in the DAP table. That is the entity that this is the look for in your advanced find. So look for contacts. The entity is contacts. We're going to have an inactive status code value for the contact via this flow. So these variables are, again, grabbing the variables we need to deactivate a record, and then we're updating the record. Now this is the kind of the secret sauce right here in this lower right hand corner. The low code, they call it low code. Well, as usual, when you're hunting and pecking for stuff on the internet, this probably took me a day to get this right. So when I was first starting out, so learned a lot, obviously going through that process, but it's pretty powerful. So I just supply the plural name of the table, the entity GUID, and then what we update. This row item contains what do we update in this record, and in this syntax of quote technical field name quote colon value is how you string this together, and it'll comma on the end of here. So these are from the data audit entity table, right? What is the state? If I'm going to inactivate a contact, what's the state code I have to set it to, and what's the status code I have to set it to? So this little step right here deactivates a record, any record from any entity in CRM, as long as we supply it with the entity name and the GUID. Deleting a row is unfortunately even much easier than that. You just need to supply the entity name and the row GUID, and that record will be deleted from CRM, from Dataverse. The notify operation. So the process here, you think about the process, we run these things every day, we run these jobs every day. If we find a problem that needs investigation, sometimes it takes a while to resolve. So what we do is when we have a record that, yep, this is a bad record, we want to let the user know about this. We first query my DAD table here to say this list records step here queries the DAD table and says, do I have an active record with this entity and this GUID in the DAD table? In other words, have I reported this problem before? If I have, I don't write out a new record to bombard our poor support agents with multiple duplicate problems. Instead, we find that record, and then I create a note. This is create a new record on the notes table that is linked further on down in this specification is the foreign key to my DAD record. So this is a note on the DAD record, and it just basically tells the user, hey, we found this already. It's still there, still a problem. So that again, they're not bombarded with duplicate requests. But the dad does have a note. How long has this been active? Well, I get a note for every time this thing ran, and it's still a problem. All right, so one of the things we do in the DAD table is store the hyperlink that refers to the CRM record being investigated. So it's a pretty easy process. They go through the active DAD records, they open them up, they click on the hyperlink to open they see what the problem is in the DAD record. It tells them what job ran. So it will say contacts without active contacts with an inactive link to an inactive account would be the name of the job on the DAD record. So the user knows, okay, this contact's linked to an active account. So they click the hyperlink, open up the contact record, and they can see, okay, open up the account record. This one was merged away. We just didn't, somehow an import messed up and we didn't move the record to the surviving account. So the user can go ahead and relink that contact to the account. But again, that requires some human intervention, some intelligence to go figure out what to do there. And again, this is a simple example. Some of these can be quite complex. So to build that hot link, you need 3 pieces of data. You need, as I mentioned earlier, that CRM base URL. This is, https://your CRM org.crm.dynamics.com. And then this is a constant /main.aspx, page type equals entity record, and the ETN. That is what entity we're working with. So you would put in contact here would be the variable here, and then the ID is the GUID. So this string creates a hot link that I store in my DAD record so that somebody just has to open up that record, click that link, and they can access the CRM record that is the problem. So we've been talking about this for a little bit. I just want to show you what the variables that have been used in that DAD record. So you can see the hot link, the hyperlink we've been talking about here. The name, I pulled together what entity, each entity record in our system has a auto number field. So we have the auto number field, the name, and I just did what time do we run this in the name. And then again, we're linking back, each DAD record links back to a job log and an audit parameter. So we have those links here. And the entity is that singular entity, and the GUID is the GUID. So again, as we mentioned, we keep this GUID here. So in case if it's a delete operation, I can go back and restore it from my Azure backup. And I mentioned we're creating inactive records for delete and activate, as there's no user intervention required. We use the active DAD records for the users to go through and resolve the anomalies we found. When we're all done, we send an email with the results. There's a compose action you can use to format an HTML table so it looks like this. And this is actually the one I got this morning that showed me, you can see there's nothing new here, but we've created a bunch of updates so that people, that on existing DADs, these problems still exist. All right, so that is the overall process to go through, grab these records, and take each advanced find query, process that advanced find query, and process each record returned by that advanced find query. So because it's so easy to create a DAP record that could delete everything in your table, I've done a few things to try to secure the process. I only allow system admins access to the data audit parameter or the data audit entity table. And actually, there are a couple of people in our support team that have now graduated to the point where they can be trusted to put in the fetch XML query correctly and build new data audit parameters, so I don't have to build them all. But I've created another Power Automate flow. It has 2 steps, and it's triggered off of the create, update, or delete of a data audit parameter record. So what I'm doing here is making, and I'm trapping it for certain columns. So if any of these columns have been updated in my data audit parameter table, I want to know about it, because that means somebody changed something that can run. Somebody could easily go in and eliminate a where clause out of a fetch XML query and produce a completely different result than the one I was expecting. So this sends me an email. So 2 steps, this step and then an email step. So this only runs when the data parameter table is updated, one of these fields is updated. But again, like I say, if one of these fields is updated, like the query string, then I should know about it, because I want to make sure that somebody's doing it right and not about to delete a bunch of records we don't want to delete. All right, so I've got actually two Power Automate jobs in this solution. So the biggest takeaways here: Power Automate coupled with Dataverse is a really powerful combination. You can use a standard CRM advanced find query as the source of data, that a Power Automate job can process record by record, and you can run this daily, whatever you want. So some of the things that we were using this for: active contacts linked to inactive accounts, qualified leads that are not linked to active contacts, and inactive contacts not modified in 90 days, we'll delete them. So you can, think of your own business use cases, but anything you can express in an advanced find query that identifies a data problem you want to investigate, you can use this tool to do that. And again, I think creating those 4 custom tables really helped solidify the process and make it easier to understand and run. That data audit parameter table allows us to create many jobs, each of which runs a different advanced find query. The data audit entity allows us to genericize the flow. Data audit job log lets us write out a log of each job processed, and then the DAD table lets us identify every data anomaly that we've uncovered through this process. Well, by the way, this DAD table can get pretty big, especially if we're deleting thousands of records and things like that. So I do have a little condition in here that says, so what I've done is I've done an advanced find query that says, show me all my inactive DAD records that are older than 30 days. So these would be things that we deleted or deactivated more than 30 days ago. So I'm going to go ahead and just get rid of those. So I run a Power Automate. I have a DAP record where my DAD table is the entity we're processing. And then I have a little switch inside the flow that says, hey, if this is a DAD table that we're deleting records from, don't write a DAD record. That would kind of defeat the purpose. So I also use this process to clean up after myself. So as you know, it used to be CRM, then it was DataFlex for a few weeks, and then it became Dataverse. Dataverse looks like it's going to stick. Microsoft Dataverse has a series of actions, and to find them all, when you add a new action, just type in Dataverse, and you'll find all of the Dataverse actions you can do. The ones we identified in this solution really are just to list rows, update a row, and add a new row. So there's a whole bunch of stuff I haven't even explored yet, really, that in the Dataverse actions. You can start using AI builder models. Sounds like to be kind of fun. But it's just this is what you can do with your Dataverse with Power Automate. So I strongly advise you to take a look and scroll through the documentation to figure out what you can do. But if you're just starting out in Power Automate, this is kind of a real fun job to kind of get your feet wet. And again, I have all kinds of documentation on visionaryrules.com. So there's a Word doc that has basically the same presentation, only a lot more descriptions of each step of the Power Automate job, so you can hopefully recreate it. And there's a blog, again, as I mentioned, detailing my experiences as an experienced CRM admin, but a novice Power Automate user. I found a ton of great links all over the blogosphere here that I've compiled in one blog. All right, that is the end of my show. Ready for any questions you may have.
Hello, okay. So Dave, there are no questions. I think people were just ingesting all the information, I believe. If there's any questions, please ask now. Whilst we're waiting, Dave, I have to say, I remember doing, obviously the way we would solve these problems back in the day, there would be heavy dependency on plugins or little tricks with the bulk delete jobs and things like that. So it's great to see how you've managed to kind of create your own solution, a pattern, should I say. You've created your own pattern to address these challenges, and a very clean one, I have to say. Yes.
Yeah, again, using CRM Dynamics, the Dataverse tables, custom entities to go ahead and build out the framework that Power Automate can use and run through, and you use that data entity table for genericizing. I was pretty happy the way this came out. By the way, the entire effort of what you saw there was about a man week of effort. So it didn't take too long. Did another man week to kind of refine a few things, but the bulk of that was done fairly quickly. Here's a takeaway. If you haven't used Power Automate, this is a great little first job to get your feet wet.
That's a good point, Dave. Yeah, so it's a nice little tutorial to get to set up Power Automate and work with data. So it's a very good point, Dave. In fact, you should do that as a way of training Power Automate. A very good exercise, I have to say.
Yep, agreed.
I remember doing a similar solution for logging milestones against records. So I remember an approach I put together to actually log the duration for different steps for different activities against records, and it reminds me a lot. Your solution actually, what you're actually doing, it's a kind of a similar kind of a use case. Obviously, yours is more for data administration and for notifications, but yes, it definitely reminds me. So it's a really cool example, I have to say. So I'm sure many people on this call are going to be inspired by your pattern and use case, and it's going to be highly valuable for managing customer information in more of a structured way. Guys, is there any more questions? So we've got Dave, obviously from the USA. So I just want to make sure if there's any other questions. Lots of great feedback for you, Dave. Namisha saying great. Thank you. Vicky as well. Lots of food for thought. Thank you. Lisa, as well as Ali. That was a good journey. So I have to agree with you, Dave. It's a great way to start learning Power Automate and a great use case that I think nearly everyone will be able to leverage on. So please try and do what Dave has mentioned today in his pattern that he's laid out. Dave, do you have any contact details or a blog that people can refer back to?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, my last slide here. Let me present again. There we go. Yeah, so yes, the visionaryrules.com site contains a link to the blogs, and there's all the blogs I mentioned. It's a 5-part series I've written detailing my experience as a new Power Automate user. So, like I said, if you're an experienced CRM vet, CRM admin, and you want to get into Power Automate, go take a look at the blog. I think you'll find a lot of powerful stuff in there. For example, I have one page that says translates what a workflow thing is in Power Automate. So you can just kind of get, if you're a CRM expert, you can kind of move into that Power Automate realm, slowly and step by step, like I did.
That's really helpful. I've shared your blog in the chat. You're not on Twitter, are you, Dave?
What's that again?
Are you on Twitter?
I am not on Twitter. I don't do social media.
No, that's fine. I was going to tag you in a message, but that's fine if you're not on Twitter. We'll do it on LinkedIn. But thanks again, Dave, for this great session. I've shared the blog for those who want to try and replicate what Dave has created there to manage and administrate your implementation, your customer data. There you have it. Okay, well, Dave, it's a great pleasure to be able to host you today. And did you have any final messages for the community?
It's just a real pleasure to be able to give back. This community has given me so much over the years. I don't know what I would have done without being able to search everybody's brilliant minds and solutions. So, nice to give back.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you for giving back. And on that note, it's an excellent note to end today's boot camp. It's been a long 2 days for a lot of people, but I'm sure you've all benefited immensely. Maybe you've accelerated your career by even 5 to 10 years by the amount of knowledge you've just gained in these 2 days. I would say so myself. So I'd just like to thank everyone who's managed to survive the 2 days.